Peace, peace. All praise to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and peace to everybody that's watching and listening in Jesus' name. Trying to get back on track, making videos. Been a little bit of a busy week, but I'm back. So you actually have to read the Bible in order to understand the Bible. Now I know some of y'all might be saying like, yeah, no kidding. Like, tell me something I don't know. Well, actually, something that is as simple as that seems to go overlooked in the average church, right? Think about it. Think about when you go to church, the traditional church. How much Bible is actually read? And what I heard said was, well, Sunday is for the sermon and we have Bible study on Wednesday or whatever day they pick. And really, Bible study should be anytime you're talking about trying to understand God. Like how do you come together and you don't have his book open? How are you debating with somebody if that's what you do? Or how are you going back and forth about what thus saith the Lord when you don't have his book open? That's like nobody goes to college with the expectation that they're not gonna have to read on the subject that they're studying, right? And then another thing, it's one thing to read and it's one thing to actually understand. Now in this little short lesson, I'm going to show you that the Bible actually says you have to read it in order to get it. So this lesson I'm dealing with how to read it, or how we should read it in order to get understanding. But there's also those of us that like me that used to read this book without any understanding. So you can read it until you blue in the face. If you don't have any understanding, it's just words to you. So I'm gonna deal with that in a later video. But in this one, we're going to see that the Bible says that you actually have to read it. So yeah, it might be entertaining or whatever to go and hear, you know, these sermons where we just find out what's on the pastor's mind, but we're supposed to be finding out what's on God's mind. And the only way to do that is to read his book. So I'm going to start off in Isaiah. Let's start off in Isaiah 28. And Isaiah is going to tell us how we're supposed to read this word, right? Isaiah 28:9 says, "Whom shall he teach knowledge, and whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast." So think about it. What does it mean to be weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast? You got to come into this thing like a baby. You got to come into this thing with, just like a baby is, a baby gets milk before it gets meat. So a lot of the stuff in the book is easy to be entreated, or it's easy to be understood, right? There are some meat lessons in here, but like the Sabbath day, it's the 7th day of the week. Look at your calendar, count 1 through 7 and see where you end up. You end up on Saturday every single time. This is easy stuff. So before we jump on the hard things, we got to start off with the simple things. Then it says in 10, "For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little and there a little." So that's why some of y'all might notice that, you know, y'all might think, man, these lessons on the Sabbath, they be pretty long, right? But again, how are we going to deal with sometimes complicated, or what the world has complicated, like once saved, always saved? How are we going to understand that in a 10-minute video just so we can please the algorithm, just so we can please YouTube and keeping our engagement high so that our video gets recommended to more people? I know, I play the game. I know I've had other channels. I know how it works, but it's time out for that, because it says precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little and there a little. You got to go here to get it. You got to go there to get it. You got to go here to get it. You got to get some in Genesis. You got to get some in Revelations. You got to get some in Leviticus. You got to get some in Luke. Then you got to put the pieces together. That's how you understand this book, right? So a lot of people say, well, you know, I'm sure that you've heard this before. Well, what would Jesus do, right? That's what people like to say. Well, what would Jesus do? We're going to see what Jesus did. Luke 4:16. And he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up for to read. Y'all hear what that said? He stood up on the Sabbath day and read. Read what? Read the Old Testament. He read the Bible on the Sabbath day. So what would Jesus do? Jesus would read the Bible. You know, this is something that's basic. You got to read the Bible in order to understand the Bible. Yeah, you got to get understanding, but that comes from the Most High, right? Because you can read it, like I said, you can read it until you blue in the face and you'll never get it. But step one is, though, you do need to read it. And I'm going to show you that, right? Because when I first came into this, what we call the truth, right? I started reading the Bible. And it was a lot of stuff in here that just wasn't making sense to me. Like, for example, the writings of Paul, which a lot of people get twisted up with. I would read Paul, you know, on one hand, it sounded like he was doing away with the commandments or doing away with the law. On the other hand, it was saying we should keep the law. So I'm like, man, which one is it? Right? But all praise to the Most High, because I wanted to know, right? That's the key. You got to want to know. You got to want this. This is something that you have to want in order for you to get it. You got to knock so that the door will be open. So let me read to you what happened in Acts, right? And this is a perfect example of that. So this is Acts 8. We're going to pick it up at Acts 8:26. And the angel of the Lord spake unto Philip, saying, Arise, and go toward the south unto the way that goeth down from Jerusalem unto Gaza, which is desert. And he arose and went, and behold, a man of Ethiopia, a eunuch of great authority under Candace, queen of the Ethiopians, who had the charge of all her treasure, and had come to Jerusalem for to worship, was returning, and sitting in his chariot read Isaiah the prophet, or Isaiah, right? It says here, I think that's Greek, Isaiah the prophet, right? So you got a non-Israelite reading, you got an Ethiopian reading the prophet Isaiah, much like I was. Just reading the words, pretty much just reading the book, not really having any understanding, but he was reading the words. So the angel of the Lord said to Philip, go on down to Jerusalem, right? Well, we're going to find out why. 29. Then the Spirit said unto Philip, go near and join thyself to this chariot. So now Philip is in Jerusalem. Now the Spirit is telling him, go over there and see what's going on in that chariot over there. And Philip ran thither to him and heard him read the prophet Isaiah and said, understandest thou what thou readest? So Philip, with some wisdom, is saying to the Ethiopian guy, hey, you know what you're reading over there? And listen to what the guy responded. He said, how can I, except some man should guide me? And he desired Philip that he would come up and sit with him. So that was smart on the Ethiopian's part, right? He said, yeah, I'm reading the book, but I mean, how can I understand it unless some man should guide me? So it's one thing to read it, but it's another thing to actually get understanding. But what was step one though? The guy was actually reading the Bible. This is something that is glossed over in the average church nowadays. You actually got to read the book. But you know why they don't read a lot of Bible? It's because you can't read this book but so much before it ends up calling you out, right? So a lot of people will read this Bible and they'll get pricked, or they'll get offended, or they'll read something and they say, oh, like, you can't keep reading about idolatry and then you see somebody shared on Facebook or somebody, whatever social media group that you're in, somebody talking about Christmas and how it's pagan, and then you reading about idolatry on Sunday, but you got a Christmas tree in your church. It's gonna call you out. So how much reading, right, does a false prophet, or even somebody that doesn't maybe understand that he's conducting himself as a false prophet, unknowingly? Like, you don't want to keep reading this book because it's going to call you out. But once it calls you out, then you have a decision on what it is that you're going to do about it. Don't harden your heart. Go ahead and receive what you're getting, right? We all had to start somewhere, right? So let's go to another place in Acts. Everybody likes to talk about Paul. They read Paul as if Paul went rogue and started teaching his own thing. But what did Paul do? In Acts 17 and 1 through 2. Now when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where was a synagogue of the Jews. And Paul, as his manner was, went in unto them, and 3 Sabbath days reasoned with them out of the scriptures. You hear what I said? 3 Sabbath days, not 3 Sundays, 3 Sabbath days. Paul reasoned with them out of the scriptures. And what was he talking about? Opening and alleging that Christ must needs have suffered and risen again from the dead, and that this Jesus whom I preach unto you is Christ. So you mean to tell me, because remember now, when this was written, there was no New Testament, right? The New Testament was in process. There was no, Paul wasn't reading from the book of Acts when he was acting out the book of Acts. So you mean to tell me that Paul was preaching a resurrected Jesus Christ from the scriptures, from the Old Testament? But nowadays, what do? We don't need the Old Testament. The Old Testament has been fulfilled. It's done away with. Paul was in the Sabbath, in the synagogue on the Sabbath day, reading the Bible, just like Jesus, in the synagogue on the Sabbath day, reading the Bible, right? Let's go to 2 more places. Let's see what Isaiah said when he was talking about some prophecy that was gonna come, right? In this chapter, he was dealing with prophecy. But what did he say? In plain terms, in Isaiah 34 and 16, seek ye out of the book of the Lord and read. You hear that? Seek ye out of the book of the Lord and read. No one of these shall fail. None shall want her mate. For her mouth it hath commanded, and his spirit it hath gathered them. So he's, like I said, he's dealing with prophecy. The Lord coming back in this chapter right here, right? Seek ye out of the book of the Lord and read. One more place. Nehemiah 8. Nehemiah 8. Let's see where we gonna start this at. Nehemiah 8, 1 through 3. Nehemiah 8, 1 through 3. Nehemiah reading to Israel, and all the people gathered themselves together as one man into the street that was before the water gate. And they spake unto Ezra the scribe to bring the book of the law of Moses, which the Lord had commanded to Israel. And Ezra the priest brought the law before the congregation, both of men and women, and all that could hear with understanding, upon the first day of the 7th month. And he read therein before the street that was before the water gate from the morning until midday, before the men and the women, and those that could understand. And all the ears of the people were attentive unto the book of the law. This is Nehemiah standing up and reading the Bible, or reading at this time the law, reading the Torah, right, to Israel. Reading, key word, Nehemiah 8 and 8. So they read in the book, in the law of God distinctly, and gave them the sense and caused them to understand the reading, right? So like I said, you got to first read it in order to get understanding from it, right? So in order to get understanding, you got to read it. And then, you know, if you want it, let the Most High do the rest. And he'll send somebody your way to give you understanding of this book, like he did me. But then once you get that, the question is, what are you going to do about it? So anyway, that was a little short one. God willing, I'll be maybe back this Sabbath day and upload a video for y'all. Not sure what I'm going to talk about yet, but y'all let me know what you think in the comments, man. Appreciate all the people who came over to this channel, and the comments and the likes and the subscribe. So with that, I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.